Next speaker is joining us virtually. Professor Alexandra Heijer is with Delft University of Technology and will be talking to us about the campus of the future and dilemmas for universities. So all the way from Delft in the Netherlands, please welcome via Zoom, Professor Alexandra Heijer. Hello, Alexandra.
Hi, very good to be there. And indeed, I traveled the shortest, I think. I'm presenting this from home.
I can imagine. So from your kitchen to your study would definitely be the shortest
Almost.
distance. I'm so looking
Yes.
forward to your presentation. It's over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here, and I'm going to talk about the campus of the futures and dilemmas for universities. And I'm at TU Delft, that's Delft University of Technology. So let's say Netherlands, close to Amsterdam. It is, a faculty of architecture that I'm based in, but a department of management. So I do have a lot of slides with photos, so that demonstrates that I'm from a design faculty, but I do often work for decision makers. So we support decision makers of universities, of course, worldwide. We hope and we know that we have outreach, but we focus a bit on Europe these days, just because we need each other in these times of budget cuts and challenges. And we always work case-based and evidence-based. And what makes us in demand as research team is that we try to combine not just the footprint issues of energy and square meters, but also money issues, people issues, and the goals of the universities. And you can see the icons behind those words, and they align with the stereotyping that I often use in these cartoons that someone makes for me, that campus management is complex matter, combining organizational, financial, social, and environmental issues. Sometimes we work for the person in the middle. Most of the time we work for the person in the middle that has to make that puzzle. And that has, and of course, your audience also represents people that are around this table. So focusing on the Netherlands, of course, I will use examples from more than the Netherlands, but we have a legacy of working with Dutch universities. Look at the scale under this map. It's only 100 kilometers, and very close. We're all very close, so we share facilities. We also share brain power around this issue, and we have been doing this for decades. We're doing research for them, but also with them. Together, we try to make a platform because, of course, as an academic, I'm a professor, I tend to want to write books, and I still do, but it needs to be in sound bites, in podcast, in MOOCs, in platform data to reach the actual decision maker. So that's what we're reaching out for in the next years. And of course, there's books, and they're also available for you because academic publications, they're freely downloadable. We have written about Campus and City, the European campus with all of its challenges, smart tools, which I will get to a lot in the next, let's say less than half an hour. But I'll give you an overview of what we've been doing, how theoretical it can be, but also how practical we are towards managing that campus in changing times, I could say. So, of course, I also want to physically meet network sometimes. So this was an example from Cardiff last April, where, of course, I also met a South African delegation. And we try to find a way to connect all of these networks as well, also in Europe, because it's not our core business to manage a campus as universities, but there's a lot of common issues involved. So we can really learn from each other. So this is the content of my presentation. So in order to say something about the future, I will have to go back to the past a bit. So that's the first part. I'll then get to dilemmas, the current dilemmas that universities, not just in the Netherlands, but we know also around us are struggling with. I also give you some data about questionnaires we did among UK universities, Finnish universities in Finland, on office use, because one of the most controversial things on campus is the office, the academic office, which is increasingly emptier, more empty, I would say. And we have data, Dutch data about that. The use of learning spaces also changing in the hybrid reality we are now. And of course, I use international references. And I'll end with smart campus tools and measuring space use real time, which is a trend, well, has been a trend for 10 years in the Netherlands. So I use, like I said, a lot of images, but also a lot of stereotyping. And since I am a professor myself, I can do this. Of course, the old school reality is that everybody has their own territorial cellular office with a lot of books, all of their awards and maps on the wall, and a private space, and not to mention, not to forget the name on the door. And this has been changing because this, of course, this old school model is also challenged a bit. Do we still keep it? Can we still afford it, or do we leave it? But what's the value, and what are the costs? That's one of the big issues also I get to. But first, going back in time, as I promised. Well, of course, this is going back in time, looking at this territorial office, because that territorial office belongs to a traditional model of the university where every faculty had its own building, even its own restaurant, library, on a personal basis, even meeting facilities. And it's still expressed in the number of buildings we have from this age. And as a coincidence, I'm doing a lecture. I'm giving a lecture in exactly this building in Utrecht this afternoon. So we're still proud of having this heritage. But there has been a transition, and that already started around the change of the millennium. But like I said, we still, as this building demonstrates, a photo from 1969. This building is still in our portfolio of TU Delft. Back then it was all parking and grayscales. Right now, this is part of a campus, so this is a recent photo of our campus. But these large-scale buildings are still there. So even, every faculty a building, even if we want to get rid of them, who are we going to sell them to? So we need to find new ways of using them for the next model of the university, more networked model of the university. So this is actually, I wanted to show you this because this is a photo of our building. Always welcome there, because we managed to transform a building from the past for flexible use of the current university. But we're not sure what the future university looks like, because that's all up to our choices. If we allow people to work from home so many days a week, because then also this building could be vacant and could have high cost and not so high value anymore. But like I said, the traditional model was followed by a kind of network model, also pushed by more interdisciplinary education and research. So bridges were built also literally between buildings, and there was more shared use of space. And these are some examples also from architecture. But certainly this is a generic educational building with lecture halls. So it also expresses that every student is welcome here and not just of a certain faculty. Of course, there's many, many buildings like this on many, many campuses all over the world now. So this is a transition that happened in the past, but we still have the territorial buildings from the first model, and we do have this type of buildings as well. We keep track of them. How well are they used? What are the costs? What is the footprint used? The use of square meters. So we keep track of that, share that with you as decision makers. And we do see it's not just lecture halls that we're sharing, it's also laboratories, it's libraries, it's learning facilities. And we would almost phrase it like, to share or not to be, we would not be able to afford these expensive facilities if we would not share them. We have to share the bill as well. But of course, on a good day, we say shared spaces are inspiring. We meet different people of different blood types. It's really a blessing, of course, to meet art school students if you are a science faculty. But of course, on a bad day, it can be grayscales, because really everybody's own ownership can also be nobody's ownership, that people feel like it's a bit clinical, it's a bit anonymous. So already in the past 20 years, we saw this transition from bricks to clicks. And that, of course, introduces that third model, virtual, place independent, everywhere around the globe, which, of course, I can criticize, but it also allows me to be there in the room with you now. So also very welcoming for students all over the world to study in different places. Of course, we are happy not just that we can work from home, but also that all of our inner cities in certainly in Europe, there's a lot of heritage that's worth using. Also in city centers, there's many libraries that open up for our communities and many terraces around the city that even have EduRoam, our university network, so that in summer people can even study and meet outside. And that is not just in the Netherlands or in Belgium where this photo came from, but also all over Europe, of course, sometimes a bit more gated, like the photo in Paris of Sorbonne, but mostly the universities are really overlapping the city. And more these cities, these facilities open up, like in Helsinki here, library very heavily used by students. And that's also how it's designed. So very happy about that. So like I said, this transition took place and we wrote about it. And every time I talked about it, I started to compare it a bit with the solid, liquid, and gas state of the university. And since I have a science background in our university, I do have an architecture background as well, but I started in science when I finished high school. I do like to see the analogy with these physical states, these states of matter, to compare the traditional state of the university with the solidness, the networked state with liquidness, so still in the same container on campus, but more mobile, and then the gas state to the community taking the space that you allow them to give. That we also measure. So we measure where people are. We started to do that in 2016. And we also started to collect data about not just where are people, which is demonstrated also in this time stream. We could see their solidness on campus. There's people that are in the same place throughout the day, but there's many people that move around, also in the office space. And there's certainly also many people that move off campus. And we also demonstrated that with this image of not just our campus, but also Delft. And this is actually simulated. This is not a real data, but we can actually simulate that throughout the day where people are and where people study. So we also know which places are not very popular, which is really interesting, of course, for finance departments to say, do we actually still need more of them or do we need to transform them? And of course, the solid liquid gas metaphor doesn't just apply to mobility of people. It actually also applies to these goals, euros, and facilities, and even the time. From the solidness being 9 to 5 to the liquid being more dynamic and to the gas being 24/7. And from an organizational perspective, the solid being more top down, you have one boss and you are in a fixed group of colleagues. The liquid referring to more horizontal organizations, so more connections between different organizations, which we all recognize. And the gas state referring to more autonomy for individuals, so making your own choice who to work with or not, or when to be on campus. And exactly that, the last part, when to be on campus, and the autonomy in that has taken a step too far in Dutch universities, I can summarize, and I will get to that in the second part. But let's first finish this first part of my presentation, the transition from these different models. So like I said, the trend was from bricks to clicks when I did my dissertation on this subject in 2011. So all publications were about this, more digital, more open, more everywhere. But already 5 years later, when we were writing the first Campus NL book, we could see a trend back to campus. And that actually started with the students that said, if we have abundance of choices, we also get overstressed and we also don't finish anything. We get delayed, we get lonely. So we could already sense that. And that's also expressed in this figure, that on the left side, on a good day, individuals are very happy with their freedom of choice and their autonomy to choose where to study and when to finish that paper. But on a bad day, that is really also stress of having too many choices and also the fear of missing out. So this is expressed in this image. And of course, we already concluded that way before Corona and the lockdowns. And it's, of course, safe to say that Corona was dreadful, but it was also the ultimate test for universities and how far that virtual gas state could go. It was the ultimate flexibility and autonomy. And it raised the question, do we still need that academic office as much as before? And that's, of course, between brackets, because we still need it, but in which form? Which, of course, brings me then to the second part of the presentation, because I'm, of course, curious where your university is going. Is it still going towards more that gas state, or is it already going back a bit in, and then I will, when you think about that, I will start this second part with the Dutch data about where things are going. If there's any questions in between, I can take them, but you can also leave them for later. You can also contact me by just searching me online. TU Delft, Alexandra campus should work. But I'll just continue with the same arrows that I just showed, also showing up in this academic workplace discussion. Where are we going? And it was safe to say that when we published our report last year in 2023, 2024, we could see that the predominant movement for the academic office was going in the arrow above, and the strategy embrace the hybrid reality. So happy that we can hire more staff that can be more flexible, that can live a bit further from their work, and that can still have a good private life and work balance. So many universities after Corona embraced that strategy. At the same time, we could again see a counter movement because people felt like, where is the community? Maybe it's good to finish a task at home and to work on something that is already defined. But in the end, it will be a risk for the innovation power and for new networks to exist or to be developed. And we did indeed ask this in Finland last year. It was November 20. I asked this a lot, this question to audiences. Which strategy is actually most applicable to your university? And you could see also in Finnish universities, even though this data set is 44 respondents of an audience last November, you can see that also universities in Finland are more likely to embrace hybrid working for home as an HR strategy, and consequently also, more empty buildings, empty office buildings, than we are a campus community. And of course, I also raised that question to the audience that's in your room. Of course, we can discuss in whatever time is left, but it's interesting to see where your universities or the universities you work for or are affiliated with are heading. And what the composition is alternatively, but it's of course a bit more academic. What is the composition of solid, liquid, and gas in your university? We do have this discussion with universities. Actually, this afternoon when I give a lecture in Utrecht, it's again on the table. What are we now? And what do we want to be? Because we sure have discovered that also too much of a gas state can make the university evaporate. And what do we want to be the dominant model? We do have to acknowledge, as Dutch, I speak for the Dutch now, that we're European champion in working from home. That comes from a lot of research. I think it has to do with with a very horizontal culture in leadership. So we do have a lot of democracy in the workplace, but consequently, and look at the amazing numbers here, and this does not apply necessarily only to universities. This is a research about knowledge workers in general. So of course it's less dramatic that at universities that because the numbers here say that 80% of the staff is less than 2 days at the office. Come on, this is really not good news. In universities, of course, the teaching keeps you close to the campus, and that's a good thing, because we see kind of the reverse in education, that students really want to be on campus. Not all the personas, not all types of students, but if you ask the employee, they want to be off campus. So many of them, and they want to be flexible. So that we have to deal with. And consequently, we also saw something happening in the metrics of the office space. So maybe 10 years ago, it was still 20 square meters per full-time equivalent staff member, and that already is much lower. It is 11. And then we're not counting yet that there's also kind of challenging utilization rates. And of course, the footprint use, or how much space we use in an office space, is also connected to those models. Solidness is more space consumption, and of course, liquidness, but certainly gas, you push the whole space demand to anywhere off campus. We did a lot of measurements. We have data on 100 buildings in the Netherlands and the use of offices. So this is made anonymous, otherwise no one would have shared it with us. It's safe to say that this is a controversial subject. I'm sure it is in many universities, maybe also in yours, to discuss also underutilization of spaces. Of course, occupancy also is lower post-COVID than pre-COVID, but the demand for meeting rooms and video conferences and video meetings, like I'm now connecting to you, that is increasing. So we need a change in the office space. We also saw the so-called camel, these are not the numbers of universities, but it demonstrates the typical use of office space in the Netherlands, which comes from a consultant, this image, but it's always nice and graphic. And I think the Friday with 35% occupancy here is even high compared to what it is now. Because in universities, this is actually the pattern. We do see the camel here. This is Dutch university data. We had enough data to see this. But it's also safe to say that the studies we have were often not made during the summer. So this is also still an inflated figure, I would say. Of course, we see other patterns as well. If people only work 1 day a week or 2 days a week or 4 days a week, there's different patterns. So we have this data. It's all in our book, Campus NL, Sharing Knowledge About Hybrid Working. If I have time, I can share the QR code later at the end of the presentation. And otherwise, it's also kind of easy to find online. So we published a lot about this academic office. But we do see that there's kind of almost completely opposing or 180-degree different strategies, and not just at universities, but also in companies. Because ironically, some of the tech businesses called their staff back to the office because they said, we can no longer function if you're all at home. And it's most ironic if Zoom calls staff back to the office, which is, obviously the company that allowed us all to work online. But what universities are most worried about is on the bottom here, that they're saying that hybrid and remote work could be the decline of serendipity in the workplace. And that, of course, is one of the ingredients for innovation, that you stumble upon something you weren't looking for. So you're not kind of just having your organized meeting with your current teams, but you fail to see new connections because you don't meet them. So this is some links, and there are even more links now Because what we see actually, and that is 1 year later, is that then the collection of these media coverage, you can already see more companies want their employees back, but they're struggling to put force on this. So that indeed brings me to, can campus tools actually work to encourage that? To encourage people back to support them better on campus, and to make it possible for them to find each other. Because if the campus gets more and more empty, chances that you meet that colleague in the corridor are also getting lower and lower. So already 10 years ago, we started to collect smart tools. And that came another cartoon. You can tell by now that I love them. And I work with the same cartoonist. He is actually also a teacher in industrial design at TU Delft. So he also teaches students how to visualize graphically what the problem is and the solution they propose. And the problem on many campuses is that towel that a lot of people put on, on workplaces, but sometimes also on offices. And of course, the ultimate towel can be that name on the door, but it can also be claiming a space or booking a space and not using it. And then there could be a huge gap between what we think is necessary on campus and what actually is. And I'm sure you're also familiar with tools that measure real time if people are there. But it's another controversial subject because not everybody wants to be followed, as much as you sometimes stress that it's also anonymous. We said we don't want to just know as facility managers, campus managers, and maybe finance directors or ICT people to know which part of our campus is used and not real time. But we actually think that the user wants to know it as well. Because how, as expressed also in the previous one, how frustrating is it for the person that really wants a space and find these towels, these so-called towels on campus? That person is also not happy with the space and could even start to work from home more often. But we think confronting not just the finance department or any department with the cost and carbon footprint is a good idea, but also the actual end user to be more aware. What does it cost if you claim space and not use it? A restaurant these days will make that perfectly clear if you make a reservation on a Friday night and don't show up. They even make you pay beforehand. And that is, of course, a culture you don't want to introduce, but maybe lightly you could introduce a culture like that. And of course, we thought about it because indeed that same person that is looking at towels in a swimming pool can be looking at tables with books on it in a library, which are actually used as towels. As we hear from students, they wake up early in the morning and for their whole group of students, they put books around tables so they can sleep a bit longer and their place is reserved. We know this is a phenomenon in many libraries in the Netherlands and further. I already showed you this. So the big data, collecting big data about where people are, and then using the data in apps that are interfaced to the students and to the staff members again, was subject of another research project that we did. So that's Smart Campus Tools. We published something in Dutch. So this book you see here, that's also freely downloadable online, is about what every university in the Netherlands does to measure this, but also a few examples from Oxford, from other sectors, other countries, innovations there. So let's see the next, because this has a time lapse. So, and this is a photo from Belgium, from a library in Leuven. There is apps in many universities already to have, to find an empty space. So where can I still sit? To have apps, but those apps, of course, should not be based just on the schedule, because otherwise you still have the problem that the data is not reliable, and then it's just saying who reserved it and not who is actually there or if it's actually used. So any of these apps should also be, fed or based on real data. And there's not just a function there in finding an empty study place, but we think there's also a future here in using these apps to find a cool or a hot place if the climate is pretty extreme, which happens a lot these days around Europe. Even now, a storm is approaching the UK again, and we're thinking about where to, where to sit or where to work when you don't really experience that as much. So we think also the clue is to make the organization more flexible, not necessarily the space. We think the key is in making the organization more flexible. And we think then, and that's, well, of course, also one of the propositions I posed, that smart tools are the future to assure campus safety. Of course, also knowing how many people are in, not necessarily who is in, but it could, of course, go as far to know if it's actually a student or a staff member or someone else, if you can use the IP addresses. But yeah, that again is controversial, but not impossible. Of course, you need smart tools to make efficient use of your campus, but also to keep your users satisfied. But the condition, of course, is that the utilization is real time. Well, I'm getting to the last slides of my presentation, so still allowing some questions about this, because we went a step further and said, you can not just make an app to show staff and students where their empty meeting room still is, or where their empty study place still is, but you can also play a bit more with their responsibility to sustainability goals and also the cost of the campus. Well, we know that many users are not so sensitive to the cost because they just think that you need to provide it, but they're very sensitive to carbon footprint of their actions. So already in one of the books 5 years ago, we kind of made this mock-up. It's not really functioning yet, but we're working on it with European universities to empower campus users also in climate action, to confront them with the carbon footprint or the consequences of their behavior on campus. We try to do that, or we think it's, of course, nicer to do that with a carrot and not with a stick, but it's nice to compare notes on this and to raise awareness also of what happens if you indeed delete a room reservation, or you keep it and not use it, like the restaurant example I gave. But also what happens if you don't want a new computer every year. Not that we get a new computer every year, but of course, if you would use a 4-year period instead of a 3-year period for changing phones and laptops, that could be huge impact. And of course, business travel is also always, there's a spotlight on it, but it's not the only thing. So we actually played with that people that have their own office actually, should be confronted also with the carbon footprint of that, and certainly if they leave it empty. And we said even a proposition, and I'm not sure I can pose it to your audience, but I did pose it to a UK and Irish audience in April in Cardiff in Wales. If you had to choose, on the spot, and if you actually have your own workplace at work, because a lot of people don't have it, would you give up your own office, or would you give up business travel? And you have to choose, you have to prioritize, because we can do the metrics of what costs more CO2. And it can even be flying if you give your own office. I could even have come to your event, personally, because I gave up my own office 17 years ago in our university. So I wrote a lot about that, by the way, but that is too much now because I've reached already the half an hour time slot. But it's interesting to discuss this. And I will give you some data of what they said in Ireland and or in Cardiff, the Irish and the UK universities. They would, the majority would give it up. Of course, this is selection bias, because I was asking a crowd that was already at the conference, so most likely they like the travel. But and of course, it's just for the sake of a questionnaire. Would they really choose this? So it's interesting maybe to ask that. We have a lot of data about this too. We will continue to study this. And we think apps and smart tools are supporting that thought to make people more aware. And that, of course, is to keep this person in the middle that we're usually doing the research for, that is making a puzzle, to engage more stakeholders around this table, especially the users that are on this corner, the orange bunch, that have a lot of smileys to deal, that they put on the table, to make them also a stakeholder that will work for you and not against you in asking more space, but maybe even asking less space to get more, to earn more air miles on campus again. So this is what we're working on. I promised you if I had a few more seconds left, I would share the QR codes to the new book with you, and then I'll leave it at this. So I hope it gave you some ideas of what we're doing, but also any comment is welcome, either now or later in the email or on LinkedIn. Thank you so
Well,
much for listening.
it certainly was very interesting, Alexandra. Many people are taking copious notes, and the conference organizers will share links to
Yes,
publications that you
good.
reference, and of course, some references. But perhaps to ask the question you asked in your other conferences, show of hands, who would give up their offers in order to not travel?
Yeah, to travel again. Yeah,
I would
to
say
earn miles.
about
Yeah.
30% of the audience would give up their office. Everyone else likes their
Oh,
office,
thanks.
and they will keep to
I'm
it.
taking notes now. I'm taking notes now.
Exactly. And congratulations on being the European champions in working from home, by the way. And if
Oh
you gave
yeah.
up your office
Yeah, I
nearly two
know.
decades ago, it absolutely makes sense. We'll leave it there,
Yeah.
Alexandra. Thank you very much for your insights. Really, really interesting. That's Professor Alexandra Den Heijer from TU Delft, reflecting on us on the campus of the future.